The 2016 presidential elections was a very interesting one to say the least, with an establishment versus populist narrative playing out in both major parties, most exemplified by the Democratic primary between populist Bernie Sanders versus establishment Hillary Clinton. Though, like the misconception of our two-party system, there was actually more than two candidates running in the Democratic primary. In fact, 4 of them are classified by Wikipedia as quote-unquote major candidates, the definition of a major candidate being someone who's a politician or someone who's large enough that a majority of people might know who he is. So let's start off with talking about those. The biggest candidate, besides Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, was 61st Governor of Maryland, Martin O'Malley. O'Malley, running from May 30th, 2015 until February 1st, 2016, his campaign was seen as trying to be the middle ground between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Though O'Malley was ideologically closer to Bernie Sanders, with positions like restoring Glass-Steagall and a $15 minimum wage, O'Malley's candidacy was endorsed by Congressman Eric Swalwell, 54th Governor of New York, Eliot Spitzer, and former Senator and presidential candidate Gary Hart. O'Malley got the support of one superdelegate in Daniel Hines, and O'Malley got 110,423 votes in the primary, though, as stated before, he dropped out before the end of the primary. The next major candidate was former Senator from Virginia, Jim Webb. Webb was speculated to be a possible running mate for Barack Obama in 2008. Webb was a very open moderate in regards to policy. The biggest example was that he was skeptical of gun control. He participated in the first Democratic debate, where when asked who was his biggest political rival, he responded with,
"I'd have to say the enemy soldier that threw the grenade that wounded me, but he's not around right now to talk to."
Though that did lead him to be the third most researched candidate of the debate, he also criticized the fact that he wasn't given as much time as Clinton and Sanders, which is a big reason why SNL made that a big thing. Webb was endorsed by political scientist Andrew Bakovich, conservative radio host Michael Savage, and even got some praise from consumer advocate Ralph Nader, though not a full endorsement. But then, he dropped out on October 20th, 2015 before any state primaries, although he expressed interest in running an independent campaign, though he ended that idea pretty soon afterwards. Despite this, he managed to get 4 write-in votes in the New Hampshire primary. He then also later endorsed Donald Trump for the presidency. The next major candidate was former Republican Senator and Governor from Rhode Island, Lincoln Chafee. Chafee was known for not only being a Rockefeller Republican, but one that was more in line with the Democratic Party than some Democrats in the Senate. Chafee's platform included ending drone strikes, ending NSA surveillance, pardoning Edward Snowden, and, much like how Martin O'Malley was for restoring Glass-Steagall and Bernie Sanders was for Medicare for All, and the biggest plank of his platform was making the U.S. switch to the metric system. Well, I mean, I guess that is an issue, but I wouldn't necessarily make that the top part of my platform if I ran for president. Chafee participated in the first Democratic debate, a debate he performed very poorly in. Many people citing his poor response to questions about his votes in the Senate, mixed with the moderators clearly interrupting him during answers. 43% of viewers stated that Chafee was the overall loser. The criticism was not lost on Chafee, who dropped out on October 23rd, 2015, without getting a single vote. The last major Democratic candidate is law professor Lawrence Lessig. Lessig was also known for creating Creative Commons and for being one of the loudest voices for campaign finance reform. In fact, for a majority of his campaign, his biggest plank was the Citizens Equality Act of 2017, which encompassed Lessig's plan for campaign finance reform, expansion of voting access, and revised redistricting laws. In fact, Lessig thought that the legislation was so important that he stated that he'd pass the Citizens Equality Act, then immediately resign because his job would be pretty much over. Although, unlike the other 5 major candidates, Lessig was treated just as bad as minor candidates, due to the fact that since Lessig wasn't a politician like the other 5, not as many people would cry foul if Lessig was ignored compared to as if they ignored, say, Bernie Sanders, where a lot of people would get mad. Lessig was not allowed to be in the first Democratic debate due to the fact that he had to get at least 1% in 3 national polls within 6 weeks before the debate. Polls that would not even have Lessig as an option. These same polls had Joe Biden as an option, despite the fact that Joe Biden wasn't running, though in the polls that included Lessig, he did manage to get 1%, so that's a plus. After poor poll performances, Lessig announced on Real Time with Bill Maher that he would serve one full term if he was elected, and was adding more planks to his platform, such as combating climate change, keeping net neutrality, and ending NSA surveillance. Lessig received the endorsement from former political commentator Dylan Ratigan, film director J.J. Abrams, graffiti artist Shepard Fairey, and got the unofficial endorsement from the U.S. Pirate Party. Though later, the DNC changed the rules so that the polls had to be 6 weeks before the debate, then again to be 5 weeks before the debate. Lessig felt that the consistently shifting time periods were specifically targeting him because he was the only major candidate that was having these issues, though the minor candidates were also complaining about these rules. And Lessig felt that since he wasn't in the first debate, there was really no realistic chance of him getting the Democratic nomination, so he dropped out on November 2nd, 2015. Although he did express interest in running as an independent, but he inevitably didn't. Despite dropping out, he managed to get 3 write-in votes in the New Hampshire primary. One last thing about the Lessig campaign is that he was mentioned in the emails leaked by WikiLeaks. Center for American Progress President Neer Tanden was quoted in an email by saying, "I fucking hate that guy, and I'd like to kick the shit out of him on Twitter, but I know that's dumb." Chairman of the Clinton campaign, John Podesta, was quoted in an email by saying that Lessig was a, quote, pompous law professor, so maybe that had something to do with Lessig's treatment. And as you can see, none of these candidates made it that far. However, there are a lot of other candidates that continued running for the Democratic nomination despite the fact that they weren't featured in many prominent polls. We'll see who those guys are in the future. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified when a future video comes out. And if you're interested in more political content from me, you can go to my website or follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Quora, or you can go check out my articles on the Independent Political Report. What are your thoughts on any of these candidates? Would you have preferred any of these candidates over Clinton or Sanders? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below.